A white cop, Rick Sanders, thought he could say anything until a racist slur aimed at a black man turned his world upside down. That man? The new chief of police. What followed would shake Rick's beliefs and force him to face the cost of his prejudice. Let's start from the beginning. Officer Rick Sanders was the kind of man who wore his authority like a second skin. Standing a solid 6 feet tall with a broad, muscular build, he had the imposing presence of someone who believed the badge on his chest gave him an unspoken right to dictate the world around him. His close-cropped blonde hair was just starting to gray at the temples, a testament to years of service on the force, and his blue eyes carried a steely sharpness that often bordered on intimidation. Rick's face was weathered, lined from years of scowling under the Atlanta sun, giving him the appearance of someone who rarely smiled unless it was at someone else's expense. His uniform was immaculate, every button polished, his belt gleaming with the tools of his trade, a holstered gun, a set of handcuffs, and a baton that seemed to hang just a little too comfortably at his side. He moved with the confidence of a man who had spent decades patrolling the streets, but there was an edge to him, a rigidity that suggested his views were as inflexible as his posture. Rick's reputation preceded him. Among his peers, he was known for his quick wit and quicker temper, often cracking jokes in the precinct that tiptoed dangerously close to offensive territory. Old school was the term most generously applied to him, though some quietly labeled him as a relic of a time the department was trying to leave behind. He prided himself on being tough, unyielding, and unafraid to tell it like it is, though his version of truth often reflected a skewed perspective steeped in bias. When Rick saw the black man leaning casually against the shiny SUV outside the diner, it was as if a switch flipped. To him, the polished suit and composed demeanor didn't signify success or professionalism. They signaled a disruption, something out of place in his mental map of the neighborhood. His instincts weren't guided by evidence, but by assumptions, a habit formed over years of unchecked authority. The word monkey left his lips with the ease of someone who didn't fully grasp or care about the weight it carried. Rick saw it as a way to assert control, to put the man in his place, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in the wake of his careless insult. Rick strolled into the precinct with a swagger that bordered on arrogance, his uniform crisp and his demeanor brimming with misplaced confidence. He made a beeline for the break room, where a few colleagues were nursing their morning coffee. Leaning casually against the counter, Rick launched into an exaggerated recount of his earlier interaction. "You should have seen this guy," he said, gesturing animatedly. Standing there all high and mighty in his fancy suit like he owned the block. Had to remind him who's in charge. Sent him packing, tail between his legs. Some people need to learn their place. His colleagues chuckled nervously, exchanging glances that betrayed a mix of unease and disapproval. They knew Rick's bravado often crossed the line, but few dared to challenge him outright. Rick mistook their silence for agreement and leaned back with a smug grin, clearly pleased with his performance. The laughter abruptly ceased as the door to the room flew open, slamming against the wall with a force that made everyone jump. Captain Mills stormed in, her imposing figure radiating fury. Short and stocky, with graying hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun, Mills was known for her zero-tolerance approach to misconduct. Her piercing brown eyes locked onto Rick, and the room seemed to shrink under the weight of her glare. "Sanders, in my office now," she barked, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. Rick straightened, his smugness faltering slightly, but his confidence remained intact. "Sure thing, Cap," he said, following her out, though his steps had lost some of their swagger. Inside the office, Mills slammed the door shut with a force that made the blinds rattle. She rounded on him, her face a mask of controlled fury. "What the hell did you do this morning?" she demanded, her tone low and dangerous. Rick blinked, taken aback. "What are you talking about, Cap?" he asked, feigning innocence. Mills leaned forward, her voice rising. "I just got off the phone with City Hall. You harassed a man outside a diner and called him a monkey. Do you have any idea who you were talking to?" Rick frowned, confusion replacing his bravado. "What? Some punk in a suit? Who cares?" Mills took a deep breath, visibly restraining herself. "That punk in a suit is Marcus Reed. He's the new chief of police, and he's starting tomorrow." The words hit Rick like a physical blow. His face paled, and for the first time, his cocky facade cracked. "Wait, what? The chief?" "Yes, the chief," Mills growled. "And he's already called a meeting with the mayor about you. If you don't want your badge handed over by the end of the day, you'd better fix this mess fast." Rick's confidence evaporated, leaving him standing there, speechless, as the weight of his actions finally began to sink in. The next morning, Rick stood in full uniform outside the chief's office, his palms sweaty, despite his outwardly stoic appearance. He'd spent the night going over what to say, how to explain himself, but nothing felt right. Finally, the door opened, and a secretary gestured for him to enter. Marcus Reed sat behind a large oak desk, his presence commanding, but not overbearing. Gone was the faint smile from the diner. His expression was unreadable. "Officer Sanders," Reed said, his voice calm but firm. "Have a seat." Rick obeyed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Chief Reed, I just want to say—" Reed held up a hand, silencing him. "Do you know why I agreed to this meeting?" Rick shook his head, his mouth dry. "It's because I believe people can change," Reed continued. "But change only happens when people confront their mistakes. So tell me, Officer Sanders, do you believe what you said to me yesterday was appropriate?" Rick hesitated, his pride warring with his survival instinct. Finally, he muttered, "No, sir, it wasn't." Reed leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Do you even understand why?" Rick swallowed hard. "I guess I shouldn't have used that word." "That word?" Reed's voice rose slightly, the calm veneer cracking. "That word is not just a word, officer. It's a slur, a weapon, used to degrade and dehumanize people who look like me. And you, a man sworn to serve and protect, thought it was acceptable to use it in a professional capacity." Rick's head dropped, shame creeping in. "I didn't mean... I wasn't thinking." "No, you weren't," Reed said sharply. "But here's the thing. Your actions reflect on this department, on this city, and on me. I can't afford officers who let their prejudices dictate their behavior." Reed leaned back, his tone softening slightly. "I could fire you right now. Believe me, I have every reason to. But I'm giving you a choice." Rick looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "You'll undergo mandatory sensitivity and de-escalation training," Reed said. "And for the next 6 months, you'll be reassigned to community outreach. You're going to work with the very people you think you understand so well. If, after that, I see any sign that you haven't changed, you're done. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Chief," Rick said quickly, his voice trembling. "Good," Reed said, standing. "Dismissed." Rick left the office, his shoulders heavy, but his mind racing. For the first time, he saw the cracks in his own worldview. It wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call he needed. Inside the office, Reed watched him go, his expression unreadable. He wasn't sure if Sanders would truly change, but one thing was certain. This department was going to be different under his leadership. and he would make damn sure of it.